People have RF and wireless transmitters in their lives and in their home and within their personal space of their bodies quite a lot for many hours a day and don't realize it and don't realize the harm. That's stronger than anything that will come in through the window, bar none. And that's something that my clients don't want to hear because they want their phone.
But there's also research that shows paradoxical effects where it's not just about the power, but the lower the frequencies, the higher the effect on neuron death on the brain and permeability of blood-brain barrier. I'm referring to Dr. Lee Salford's work. So we have to always remember that maybe there are other effects. Yes. It's not linear.
Yes. Yes. So there are many things that contribute or determine the effects that exposure to RF frequencies are going to have on any individual person, and there's a whole range of sensitivity. There are people who are sensitive but not symptomatic. There are people who don't have any sensitivities whatsoever, and the question arises, how harmful is this stuff for them? The researchers have shown that 100% of cells in close proximity to wireless devices and transmitters, when held next to their body, do experience damage on the mitochondrial level and DNA level, but 2/3 of the population, roughly speaking, according to the researchers, can repair that damage when they sleep at night, but 1/3 can't, and that's a lot of people in the world's population who have symptoms, and their medical practitioners don't understand and they don't understand what the correlation is because the cell companies have been successful at keeping that knowledge out of the mainstream thinking in media and academia and government regulatory agencies.
So, and then the genetic mutations passed down to future generations.
Yep, that too. So people need to understand the danger from the devices within their own space, on their bodies and in their homes, in addition to everything else we've been talking about coming in from outside, from these transmitters outside.
If we could just end with a big picture view of this whole situation where we're rolling out all this radiating antenna infrastructure, and it's all additive in our homes, outside our homes, and coming closer and more and more and more, and wearable wireless, all of this. What do you recommend to regulators or to people in government, elected officials? Should we be stepping back from this? Should we be looking at other technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. On the one hand, you've got industry that wants to make money, and another thing that they want to do is wireless internet. That's how the cell companies want. That's another new revenue stream that they're moving into. They can charge whatever they want in terms of data caps, because 25% of people who subscribe will exceed that, and that's going to be a moneymaker for them as these cell carriers compete with these small cell antennas beaming in the data over the last mile wirelessly, whereas they use a hardwired infrastructure, including fiber optic, which you can move terabytes of data for pennies in fiber optic cable, which they'll run to their small cell antennas, but then the last mile is wireless, which means the last 30 to 50 feet to your house, or 100 feet, depending on where you are on the block relative to the small cell antenna. And because they're wireless, they're not regulated by the Public Utilities Commission of your state, whereas the cable company and the telephone company that provide fixed cable-generated or carried internet data are regulated, and there's a cap on how much they can charge customers. So that's the business model of the cell carriers. They'll be wireless, and so they can charge people whatever they want and make money that way. So that's part of it. And as far as regulators are concerned, they're caught between a rock and a hard place, Camilla, because on the one hand, the public wants this. They don't necessarily want download speeds to be enhanced. They say that that the market's pretty mature for 4G. Most people are satisfied with it. They're not clamoring for faster download. The geeks are, the techies are, and the millennials may be, but there are a lot of people who are satisfied with what they have. So the cell companies have to come up with new revenue streams, and harvesting data through 5G and competing with the cable companies and telephone companies with fixed wireless internet, which Verizon's doing, is part of their business model. So the regulators, the problem, let's just take a step back from the regulators. I mean, the problem is with the public. I'm one of the busiest building biologists in the country, and I go into people's homes every day here in Southern California, in the Los Angeles area, and I work with them. And I have a gamut of people, and 2/3 of my clients are sensitive, and everybody's health conscious or symptomatic, and that's why they're calling me. I don't deal with the rest of the public who doesn't care about this, doesn't feel it, doesn't know about it, doesn't care. I don't deal with them unless they live in the same house as the people who do call me, who are symptomatic or health conscious. And the point is, even the people who are health conscious, they call me for one type of EMF or another, and I deal with all four. So if they call me because of a high reading on their tri-meter, as they call it, the tri-field meter that shows they've got wiring errors and high magnetic fields, when I get into the radio frequency part, and these are people who are symptomatic and health conscious, and I start telling them and showing them how strong the signal is from the cell phone in their pocket and the cordless phone and all the things that they have in the house, they don't want to hear it. I have mothers who say, you don't understand, Oram. This is the only way that I can communicate with the other moms to organize play dates for our kids is texting. We're texting. And I see it. The whole 6, 7, 8 hours I'm there, they're texting back and forth to people all day long. And they've got that cell phone right next to them all day long.
That's the problem. Many of them are also addicted. And, people think that it's algorithms that are designed to addict us, and that is the case. But the EMFs also are addictive. And Martin Paul has talked about that at our recent program in New York on tech addiction. So, it's a problem. You're saying the problem is people that aren't...
The genie's out of the bottle, and I don't know how we're going to put it back in. Now, what we say to answer your question, what we say in the building biology profession is, and in general in the EMF safety community, is which you're a part of, as you well know, and that is, in general, what people should do regarding what their personal use of wireless devices is three things. Number one, reduce use. Number two, increase distance. And number three, favor hardwired connections whenever and wherever possible. This great book that was developed by you, Camila, and Tim Shockley, this great book, which I have right here, published by, it's right here on my desk, the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy in Washington, D.C., entitled Reinventing Wires, The Future of Landlines and Networks. This is a roadmap, a Bible, a guideline for how to utilize the existing hardwired infrastructure that we have within buildings, within homes and offices, and in communities, and enhance that. In fact, when I went to this trade show last year here in L.A. for the 5G industry, I heard them these cell companies were touting the miles of fiber optic infrastructure that they were putting in place as the backbone, for the backhaul network for their small cell wireless antennas. Well, they could run those wires all the way to the house, fast fiber optic service, and compete with the cable with Cox and Comcast and Spectrum, the old Time Warner, which is the cable companies, and also Frontier and AT&T, the telephone companies, for high-speed internet data. But they won't do it because the cell companies won't do it, because then they'll be regulated by the public utilities commissions in each state, and it would impair their income stream.
You mentioned the access board in your report, and that people could assert their rights to keep away from this radiation. Do you think they could assert their rights to have fiber to the premises and not have antennas on the street outside their home?
Well, politically, this is what the activists who told me about this said is it has to be done properly. They don't want to set bad precedent. They want to set good precedent in terms of test cases in various states around the country. And there are some that some didn't work out. Others are pending, and I haven't heard the latest on that. But the last time that I wrote this in research, it was April and May when we got it to the building biology profession to put on their website. But so it's tricky. It has to be done right. But you can do it on the basis of, there's a whole legal analysis of this going back to the 1996 Telecommunications Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, which preceded that by a few years in the 1990s. That can be invoked, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and municipalities have to provide a buffer of low or no wireless around the home of a person who has a disability, if it can be proven or certified by a physician.
Did you read that? We now have a diagnostic code for...
Oh, yes, right.
That's progress.
And physicians need to be educated about this.
One last question on shielding. You mentioned in your report there are certain things, methods, approaches that are going to work with the 5G, others that won't, where we're talking about fabrics and paints and aluminum foil, and if you could just give a quick snapshot of that.
Certainly. So as far as shielding is concerned, people who are either sensitive or who are just want to be healthy and protect themselves need to understand several things. Number one, they have to be concerned about and protect themselves from 3G and 4G signals as well as 5G. And remember, 5G is just a name for all the technologies that are coming, the enhancements, at both frequencies, below 6 gigahertz and above 20 gigahertz in the coming decade of the 2020s. And so that means that So beamform signals are going to get through regular building materials, but we do believe, sent from transmitters that are transmitting above 20 gigahertz in the millimeter band, and we do believe that the solid materials, like 2 layers of paint, the carbon-based Y-Shield paint, or the copper-based Cooper Coat paint, or the Air Pure, I think is the name of it, which is nickel-based, or this relatively thick building-grade aluminum foil that is sold by Safe Living Technologies at slt.co, that you can put in your walls underneath your sheetrock or over your interior wall, will block those 5G signals, but fabric won't because of the weave, and insect mesh screen will not block signals above 20 gigahertz because the wavelengths are too small. But don't forget, there's a 4G component that comes along with this. When they start putting small cell antennas in front of people's homes, it won't be 800 to 1,000 watts like the macro towers are that are spaced 1.5 miles apart. These small cell antennas may be a few hundred watts for the 4G, but that'll be always on, continuously spraying that RF from the 4G component. The 5G will be idle until somebody initiates a connection. So 5G, the super 20 gigahertz millimeter band beamform signals that everyone is reading about and fearing will be more of an issue in urban areas, in dense urban areas, and less of an issue in suburban areas, and very little of an issue in rural areas. That comes last because there's not many clients or customers outside of town. If you're away from people, the cell companies are not going to put a small cell antenna out there because there are very few customers. So, but as far as the shielding is concerned, the other thing to remember is if you put shielding up on your walls to block signals from coming in, you darn sure better not have transmitters inside because those are bad for you and they're at close range and they probably create a stronger signal that we could measure with our radio frequency detectors than anything coming in from outside, number one. And number two, if you start putting shielding up on your walls and you still have a router and cordless phone base unit, which is always transmitting, and using a cell phone and tablets and wireless everything, or even anything wireless, those signals are going to hit the inside of the shielding and bounce back in and collect and enhance or increase your exposure to radio frequencies inside your house because you're now surrounded by a Faraday cage.
I have that situation myself here where if they start putting antennas outside, I'm going to be in trouble because I've got that aluminum from Safe Living Technologies on one side of my premises.
And windows are a big hole in the wall. So no matter what you do with the walls, you have to treat your windows as well. And the 3 tools we have for that are transparent window film, and there's a smoky version which is called Scotch tint, which is a bit darker, but it's better because it's got more metal in it, more little metal particles. You can still see through it, but it has a grayish tint, so it's darker, which also blocks the sun rays and keeps your house cooler in terms of incoming sunlight. Then you also have metal mesh window screen, and it has to be metal. It doesn't matter if it's aluminum or steel. The screens we have today are vinyl; they're plastic, so they don't block anything. And also low emissivity windows, that have this greenish tint on it, they block about 60-70% of the RF coming through, so that helps. But they do make, you can get a window screen contractor to come to your house and put up a metal mesh insect screen, or you can buy even tighter weave copper-based mesh screen from lessemf.com, which you can't see through very well, but because it has a tighter weave. But it blocks more radio frequencies because of the tighter weave, and the holes are smaller between the metal threads. So that allows air to move through if you have to open the windows or want to open the windows and you don't have the film because you've opened the windows. And then you can have curtains over, like Veil Shield allows some light to come through. It's kind of opaque. And Argent Mesh is probably a little better, but you can't see through it. So, these are the tools that we use for windows.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're a wealth of information, and I'm thankful for your time, Oram. Really appreciate it. We've been speaking with Oram Miller, who's a certified building biologist and electromagnetic radiation specialist. And if you want to learn more about his work or listen to other programs on his site, you go to createhealthyhomes.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla.